From now on, the German parliament consists of 630 deputies, 100 fewer than in the previous term. Additionally, the Bundestag now has 5 factions instead of 6. The new head of parliament is Julia Klöckner from the Christian Democratic Union. However, the formation of the new government remains uncertain. Earlier, Friedrich Merz, the leader of the CDU and candidate for chancellor, noted that coalition negotiations between the ruling CDU-CSU and the Social Democratic Party could be conducted by April 20. Following the snap elections, the influence of both far-right and far-left parties has grown, with the Alternative for Germany and the Socialist Left Party now holding a third of the Bundestag seats, enough to block key decisions.
The Alternative for Germany and the Socialist Left Party now have, among other things, a blocking minority, making constitutional changes impossible without their consent. This forced the CDU, CSU and the SDP to amend the Baltic Law through a vote in the outgoing Bundestag just days before the first session of the new one. Restrictions on borrowing were lifted to fund a multi-billion euro program for the rearmament of the Bundeswehr and the modernization of the country's infrastructure, from the Deutsche Welle publication.
On March 21st, German upper house approved amendments to the basic law that is debt restrictions. This allows the creation of a 500 billion euros fund for infrastructure projects and investments in the defense industry.
In terms of world politics, we are living in a completely new situation. Unlike in previous years, we can no longer take military support from the United States and the transatlantic partnership for granted. This is a real paradigm shift that we are experiencing. We must make our country stronger and more independent at all levels.
Friedrich Merz believes that Germany's planned increase in borrowing to fund defense spending and stimulate economic growth signals a new era in European security.
We have believed in a deceptive security in our society for at least a decade, probably much more. Now we have to rebuild our defense capabilities partly from scratch, using a technology-driven defense and procurement strategy, with automated systems, with autonomous European satellite surveillance, with armored drones and with many modern defense systems. And above all, these reliable and predictable orders, which should go to European manufacturers whenever possible. Ladies and gentlemen, this is now the paradigm shift in defense policy that lies ahead of us. Regarding Friedrich Merz, his words speak for themselves. Essentially, we should receive real support in military technology. Given Germany's economic capabilities, it can become a key driver for Ukraine in a future military alliance. For Ukraine, this is crucial. Last year, Germany allocated over 8 billion euros in aid, and this year they plan to allocate at least as much. We can already see the steps they have taken to amend their constitution to make this possible.
On March 18, Friedrich Merz announced that Berlin had approved an additional 3 billion euros in military aid for Ukraine in 2025. These funds will be used to produce ammunition, drones, armored vehicles, and air defense systems. The German government has also confirmed that in the next 2 years, Ukraine will receive German IRIS-T air defense systems. Berlin plans to allocate more than another 8 billion euros to Kyiv by 2029. Reported by Katerina Bastun, Christina Dombrovska, UATV News.
In a statement at the last meeting of the Bundestag of the 20th convocation, Friedrich Merz, leader of the Christian Democratic Union and candidate for Chancellor of Germany, declared that the defense capability of Germany and Europe must be restored. He emphasized that Putin's aggressive war against Ukraine has proven the urgent need to strengthen Europe's defense. To achieve this, substantial multi-billion euro investments are necessary. The topic of the Bundestag debate focused on amending the constitution to allow for increased increase spending in 3 key sectors through new state borrowings. The initiative was approved by 513 deputies, a majority, while 207 voted against it.
The decision we made today could be the first important step toward a new European defense community. This will include countries that are not EU members but are very interested in creating this common European defense alongside us, such as the United Kingdom and Norway.
The Bundestag approved the suspension of the so-called debt brake on defense spending. Now, security-related expenditures exceeding 1% of GDP will no longer be subject to debt limits. Notably, before the parliamentary elections in February, Friedrich Merz has opposed the lifting of the debt restrictions. However, now, in his view, the situation has dramatically changed. Europe can no longer rely on the United States, and Putin is waging war against all of Europe, not just Ukraine. Regarding defense investments, Merz is convinced that emphasis must be placed on technological defense strategies, independent European satellite surveillance, drones, and other modern defense systems. Furthermore, reliable defense contracts with predominantly European arms manufacturers are necessary.
Merz said it was time to acknowledge the new era in which Germany found itself, not least having to be independent from the US. We understand the worries. We understand the criticism, he said, but added, we have, for at least a decade, felt a false sense of security. Germany had now to face a paradigm shift, which Merz said required us to rebuild our defense capabilities, in part from scratch. Friedrich Merz, candidate for Chancellor of Germany from The Guardian publication.
The Bundestag also approved the creation of a special off-budget fund of 500 billion euros for infrastructure modernization. Merz's initiative aims not only to strengthen the country's defense capabilities but also to stimulate the economy, which has been in recession for 2 years, according to experts. The document now needs approval from the Bundesrat, the upper house of the German parliament, with voting scheduled for March 21st. Bloomberg reports that the chances of approval are high. Previously, Friedrich Merz stated that Germany would make a significant contribution to ensuring Ukraine's security. Berlin will provide Kyiv with an additional 3 billion euros in 2025. Recently, the German government updated its list of military aid to Ukraine, which will include, among other things, Gepard anti-craft systems, IRIS-T missiles, and ammunition.
Additionally, it is important to note that beyond investments in security and infrastructure as outlined in the main law, we are finally allocating another 3 billion euros to support Ukraine in 2025. This means that Germany will continue to provide Ukraine with 7 billion euros, as we did last year. Our goal is a strong and sovereign Ukraine.
During the Bundestag debates, Minister of Defense of Germany Boris Pistorius emphasized that Germany is facing the greatest security challenge in its history. The primary threat to Europe is Russia. The Minister of Defense of Germany called on Europeans to learn to take responsibility for their own defense. At the same time, he added that Germany would need to assume a central role in Europe's defense. Reported by Alexandra Zaslavets, Victoria Smirnova, UATV News.